What up? What up? Just checking in, tapping in, doing what it is I need to do, following my spirit, so they say. Um, I'm annoyed because I just sat down and tried to record one of these and realized I forgot to turn my mic on. So I did all this dope inspirational stuff, man, and I lost it all because there was no audio. But it's whatever. It's whatever. Um, but what I'm getting at is I feel like it's time to get back in album mode. Earlier this year, man, I had all these plans. I did all these things to re-release my album. I was gonna do a deluxe edition, do all these things, man. I got it remastered, added some tracks, made it a fully immersive project. But then I started realizing that I was in a place where I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't happy, and I felt it kind of disingenuous to promote a record about self-discovery, about joy, about all these things when I was feeling none of it myself. I had kind of lost sight of who I was and what I was doing. Kind of got comfortable in the space of doing these things out of, just doing the things I had to do. Um, Not really doing the things I needed to do, not really doing the things I wanted to do. Like I said, you can live a life of service, but you got to have some purpose involved in it as well. You can make all the money in the world, but if you ain't taking care of yourself in the process, man, it doesn't really hold a whole lot of value. Um, so like I had to take a step back and figure out what it was that I was trying to do, figure out what it was that would make me joyful again. You know what I mean? And one night I was sitting there thinking, when I first fell in love with music, it was through records. Listening to vinyl, going through my pops collection, um, you know, figuring out how these sounds and these songs were made, listening to it and wanting to know how all that stuff works. How did they do that? How did they do this? And so slowly but surely, I started collecting records again. I started crate digging. I started, going to record shows and, just shopping, really doing these things. And it really put me back into a childlike place where I was loving it again. Like it made me think of all the memories of like with me and my family, we would go on family vacations when I was a kid. And no matter where we went, me and my pops would always duck off at some point to go to a record store and browse the selections and pick up stuff to bring home. And that's where I got a lot of my knowledge and love for music. Because like I said, I would take them records home and I would dissect them. That's how I learned how to play. Like I learned how to play everything by listening to records and trying to pick out notes and sounds and all these things. And I forgot how much I miss just enjoying music for the sake of music. Not thinking about I needed records to promote, not trying to learn a song, to mimic, to do anything. Just listen to music. Whether I'm blasting the stereo or whether I got the headphones on. It was just like enjoying music. I hadn't done that in a very long time. Because my mind is always like, oh, I can do something like that. Let me find a groove like this. So I wonder, what did they do to make that happen? Whatever it might be. Um, I was at a place where I was actually just enjoying listening to music and collecting records and doing the whole thing. It's an experience I got to share with my kids. Now they're building their little record collections and all these things, and it's like the cycle is repeating. It's the natural progression of this circle of life, I guess. And all that reminded me is that I still got this great body of work that has only been minimally heard. Like it's time for me to get back out here and make my record part of this canon that's out there changing lives. Like one day, somebody is going to find my joint and feel the same way that I do about these records that I collect. And I'm doing myself and my fans and future fans a disservice by not getting back to that place I need to be at to put it out. So that kind of leads me to where I am today. Like I'm back in album mode. Like I said, I'm gonna put it back out. I got a deluxe edition. There's probably about 10, 12 more songs on there than the original. Some remixes, some instrumentals. Just a more cohesive package. And I also got my own vinyl dropping later on this summer. I'm doing the 7-inch to Pop's Blue Caddy. I'm still taking pre-orders for that, so make sure to get at me. But yeah, in the next few weeks, I'll be putting it up on the deluxe on Bandcamp, and I'll be putting the version uh, up on normal streaming services for those that want to take a gander and see what's happening. And then for those that want to financially support or do things like that, you have both options. Like I said, I'm really trying to build my fan base outside of streaming services, but that's a whole that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other can of worms. Um, but I want it to be accessible, so I'm doing that. I'm gonna tap back in with a few more stories and just things about life and where I'm at, where the project is at. To kind of give you some insight on really who I am and what I'm doing. Like I know the people that know me, but there's a lot that don't. So I'm like, how do I make that more concrete? You know, I will say one thing that I've learned in these last few months, and it's something I knew already, but it just kind of got re-solidified that joy, happiness is a process. It's not a constant. You got to work at it to make that a constant presence in your life. And sometimes I forget that. I forget that I got to get up with the intentions on being happy, with the intentions of making a difference, with the intentions of being present. Like, it's easy to forget that when you get caught up in the cycle of everyday life. But I also realize that I'm no good to nobody else to find good to myself. And I used to think that was like a selfish way of thinking, but I'm like, actually, it's the most brutally honest and probably the best way that you can get to the next level and be everything that you actually want to be. But it is, man. It's the process, and like every day I wake up with the intentions of finding joy and seeking happiness, and I think that changes the approach to the day. But all that to say, you thank you for those who stuck around and listened to my ramblings. But Joy Algorithm, Deluxe and Expanded, coming soon.